This is a video slideshow of a restoration of a 1970 Chevy C10. I purchased the truck in February of 2021 and completed the restoration by September of 2022. All of the work was done by myself and my father at my parents' house in Southern California. We started by pulling the rotted wood out of the bed of the truck before cutting through the rusted hardware that was still holding the bed to the frame. Then we began taking the truck apart piece by piece. Shocks, cowl, hood, grill, fenders, radiator, fan, belts, hoses. Before we knew it, the body was pulled off of the frame and we could get started on restoring this C10. Once the cab had the seat and floor mat removed, we could start to see what kind of rust we would be dealing with. Luckily, the floors weren't that bad. Both rocker panels definitely needed to be replaced. We started working on the rear chassis first. The Chevy 12-bolt rear end was opened up, inspected, and the rear pinion seal was replaced. The rear axle track bar bushing was replaced, but the old one needed a little heat to get it to come out. I did the chassis in two sections, back half and then the front half. I took the chassis down to the bare metal, applied Eastwood's rust encapsulator, and then sprayed it with chassis black. Once the back half of the chassis was finished, I started on the front half. We began taking off the control arms, coil springs, pitman arms, tie rod ends, tie rod sleeves. Some parts were replaced, others salvaged. I took the springs and control arms into the backyard to hit with the wire wheel. I purchased a ball joint removal kit and my first torque wrench to remove the ball joints from the control arms. They did not come out without a fight. Same as the chassis, these parts were taken down to bare metal, coated with rust encapsulator, and then finished with chassis black. Then the new ball joints were installed in the control arms along with control arm bumpers. Now that all the components for the front end were ready, I took the rest of the chassis to bare metal, put on some rust encapsulator, and then painted it. Once the paint dried, it was time to rebuild the front end. Everything was looking very nice. We added aftermarket front and rear sway bars from Summit, not original for 1970. New shocks were installed, and the drive shaft got cleaned up as well. You can see the stages of the engine. When I bought the truck, it had a Camaro 350. The original 350 had been replaced at some point, but still sounded good. So we opened up the timing cover, replaced the chain, closed it up, and repainted it Chevy red orange. For the exhaust, I used the original exhaust and headers, cut it up, re-welded it so that it would dump out by the back of the cab. A little louder than the original, but it sounds good. The radiator support had a section that was rusted out. I saved as much of the original as I could and welded in a piece of metal that we had lying around to replace what was missing. I was very happy with the way this turned out. It got sprayed chassis black as well. Things are starting to come together. Engine is coming together, radiator support is on the truck. No need for a fan. I replaced the original radiator and fan with a Griffin electric fan and radiator combo. Now the bodywork can begin. As we move from the chassis to the cab, we see some holes in the cab corners. Both cab corners were replaced. I bought all of my patch panels from the truck shop in Orange, California. I may not have had the best welder. Next time I would use a MIG welder. But final product came out looking great. First I figured out what I wanted to cut off. Then I cleaned up what was under that. Marked my patch panel, cut the panel, and then started tacking the panel to the cab. I used a flux core welder, messier than MIG, but once the primer was on there, it looked pretty good. As you saw earlier, the rocker panels were a mess too. The rocker panels had spot welds that needed to be drilled out. Once all of these were located and drilled out, you could see the amount of rust between the rocker panel and the inner rocker panel. This area got cleaned up, rust encapsulator was applied, and the new rocker panel was fitted and tacked into place before being welded in for good. On the driver's side, several pieces had been rusted out. The footwell, rocker panel, part of the floorboard, and the front door pillar. I saved as much of the original floorboard as I could and made sure to line up the patches to the best of my ability. All of the original metal was cleaned up and was covered with rust encapsulator. I had 3 holes in my front door pillar. I made new metal pieces to fit the holes and welded them in. Once the primer was sprayed over the welds, you can't really see where the welds were made. Now for the fenders. Some rust. Fender patches were bought from the truck shop. I cut out the rusted sections, cleaned the area as best as I could, rust encapsulator was applied. I measured the patch, cut the patch, welded the patch on, and then applied a little bodywork, primer, and paint to the area. On the passenger side below the battery is a common spot for corrosion, as you can see. But they make a patch for that. Cut out the old one and weld on the new one. The bed. My plan with the bed was to get all of the rust off, inside and out, but I decided to leave all of the dings that were inside the bed from tools or debris rolling around over the years, since I was intending to use this truck as a daily driver. I had one hole behind the rear tire on the driver's side that I filled in and cleaned up. I took the bed down to bare metal, sprayed self-etching primer, epoxy primer, paint, and clear coat. The paint was matched by the paint store in Laguna Niguel, California. It was paint code GM504 medium olive, the original color of this truck. Herculiner was used under the bed, cab, and on the bed reinforcement strips. When we got to the cab, there were very few dents on the exterior of the cab. The rocker panels and cab corners were already finished. I just had to do a little prep work, a little filler, and tape off the windows. The cab received self-etching primer, epoxy primer, paint, and clear coat. My dad did all of the spraying on this project while I was mixing the primer and paint. You can hear how sticky the garage floor got from the clear coat overspray. The two of us were able to get the cab back on the frame by ourselves without being injured. It was a little sketchy, as you can see. Once the cab was back on the frame and having the bed painted, we could focus on what was left. We needed to paint the doors, fenders, inner fenders, cowl, and hood. Some things got sprayed in the backyard and some in the garage. It just depended on the weather. The bedwood was one of the last things done to the truck. It was southern pine, came with all the holes drilled into it. We decided not to stain the wood, but applied several coats of the automotive clear coat that we used on the rest of the truck. The clear coat gave the wood a really nice shine. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, give it a like. I'll be uploading a 4K video of the finished truck soon, so if that is something that you would be interested in, give me a follow. I'd appreciate it. Thanks again for watching.